Listen, you are not weak, and you certainly aren't broken. But right now, you are essentially playing a high-stakes, incredibly complex game while wearing a blindfold. Think about what happens when a situation blows up in your face. A relationship fails, a business deal falls through, or an opportunity vanishes. What is the very first thing you do? You immediately tell yourself a highly specific, very convenient story. You convince yourself and everyone around you that you were betrayed by circumstance. You blame bad luck, a fluctuating economy, or the toxic state of modern dating. You sit around with your friends and tell them the other person was simply incapable of appreciating your true value. It is a very comforting narrative, isn't it? It feels incredibly good to play the misunderstood protagonist in your own movie. But let's be entirely real for a second. This is a masterfully crafted illusion, engineered from the ground up by your own mind. Your ego will always, without fail, choose to be comforted rather than corrected. Your brain is literally sitting in the editing room, actively cutting and splicing the raw footage of your own life just to save your pride. You are trapped in a vicious cycle of validation addiction. You fear losing your perceived status so deeply that you would rather completely rewrite reality than face a single flaw. And the worst part? This keeps you completely blind to your own structural weaknesses. Today, we are going to drag this psychological defense mechanism into the light. We are going to expose it, break it down, and show you exactly how to stop lying to yourself. In behavioral psychology, this little mental glitch is known as the self-serving bias. And honestly, it is a fundamental flaw in how the human machine processes failure. The concept is incredibly simple, almost comical when you step back and look at it. Think about playing a video game or a sport. When you win, you gladly take all the credit, right? You won because you are smart, you have highly tuned skills, and your strategy was flawless. But when you lose, suddenly the controller is broken, the game is lagging, or the referee was blind. Your brain instantly flips the script. You immediately blame external forces that were entirely out of your control. You say the timing was wrong, the environment was toxic, or the other person was playing manipulative games. You categorically refuse to absorb the loss into your own identity. Why on earth does your brain do this? It is not because you are a bad person. It is an ancient evolutionary defense mechanism. Back in early social hierarchies, your status wasn't just about feeding your ego. It determined your absolute survival. Admitting a massive personal failure in front of the tribe meant a dangerous, potentially lethal drop in rank. So, your brain learned a neat biological trick: deflect the blame to protect your social standing. It is a survival mechanism designed to keep your confidence artificially intact. But today, that exact same mechanism is holding you hostage. This brings us to validation addiction, which plays a massive, destructive role in this ongoing self-deception. When people agree with your false narrative, your brain gets hit with a massive dopamine spike. Think about it. You post a complaint online, or you tell a heavily one-sided story to your inner circle. They nod, they validate your victimhood, and they give you this warm, unearned sympathy. In the moment, that sympathy feels incredibly soothing. It feels like real support. But make no mistake, it is a highly toxic substitute for actual respect. This loop literally trains your nervous system to seek comfort instead of seeking growth. You morph into a man who hunts for validation rather than hunting for tangible results. And over time, this validation loop completely rots your internal frame from the inside out. A strong frame relies entirely on a foundation of unshakable, brutal truth. When you substitute the truth with a convenient lie, your frame hollows out. You might walk around projecting fake confidence, but underneath the armor, you are deeply, fundamentally insecure. And trust me, high-value people can sense this energetic incongruence from a mile away. In the modern world, leaning on this ancient defense mechanism absolutely destroys your potential. It triggers a complete collapse of your internal structure. Look at a man with a genuine, unshakable frame. He doesn't need to distort reality. He can look directly at a massive failure, dissect the data, and absorb the lessons without experiencing an emotional breakdown. He understands that a loss isn't a permanent tattoo on his soul. It is just a temporary measurement of his current skill level. When you blame everything on external factors, you are essentially surrendering your inherent power. You are looking at your subconscious mind and saying that you have no real control here. You willingly become a passive, helpless victim of circumstance. Your dopamine system gets completely hot-wired to seek the easy comfort of excuses. You get a quick chemical hit of relief simply by shifting the blame. This intermittent reinforcement makes the habit of making excuses incredibly addictive. You literally become addicted to your own victimhood. I do not need to tell you that this is the exact opposite of high-value behavior. High-value behavior requires taking absolute, unflinching ownership of every single outcome, good or bad. Let's observe how this actually looks in everyday life, because I guarantee you have seen it or done it. The first applied insight involves the automatic scripts of pride protection. Picture this. A man faces a clear, undeniable rejection. His ego instantly hits the panic button and generates a defense. What is the most common script? He tells himself that she was just intimidated by him. Or he quickly decides that they were simply too immature to handle his level. He uses these carefully curated phrases to project an aura of superiority. He desperately wants to believe he was simply too high value for the situation. But in reality, this is a very low-value, transparent coping mechanism. It is a frantic, desperate attempt to avoid feeling the sharp, cold sting of rejection. Let's be brutally honest. Maybe they weren't intimidated at all. Perhaps you were actually way over-available and completely suffocated the attraction. Perhaps you lacked walking-away power and came across as incredibly needy. This coping mechanism is heavily prevalent in modern dating dynamics. A guy will consistently ignore clear, flashing signals of disinterest. He will ignore his own lack of emotional control during the interaction. Then, when the connection finally snaps, his ego cannot process the failure. So, he spins a tale. He tells himself that his raw ambition or his intense intelligence simply frightened them away. He takes his own aggressive or needy behavior and slaps a passion label on it. This reframing is lethal because it prevents him from analyzing his lack of emotional discipline. By labeling the other person as intimidated, you successfully avoid looking in the mirror. You learn absolutely nothing valuable from the interaction. You preserve a fake image of perfection while your actual interpersonal skills decay in the background. The second applied insight is the persistent, universally loved myth of bad timing. Men absolutely love to blame the calendar when a golden opportunity slips through their fingers. They say the circumstances were just not correctly aligned for success. They blame their demanding job, the fluctuating economy, or the shifting landscape of modern day.
Let me burst that bubble. This is just another highly sophisticated trick of a fragile ego. Bad timing is rarely the actual reason a situation falls apart. Usually, the real culprit is a severe lack of strategy
or incredibly poor execution. You didn't read the social cues correctly in the heat of the moment. You completely failed to establish clear, unshakable boundaries from day one. You gave away your attention for free, and surprise, you immediately lost all your leverage. But admitting that you mismanaged the dynamic, that deeply hurts your pride. So you use the abstract concept of timing as your scapegoat. Here is the truth. The excuse of bad timing almost always hides a complete lack of walking away power. When you possess true walking away power, timing doesn't dictate your life. You state your terms clearly, and you enforce your boundaries without a second of hesitation. If the environment or the person cannot meet those terms, you don't wait around. You simply leave the table. You do not sit in the lobby hoping for the circumstances to magically align in your favor. But men without a strong frame cling to bad situations like a life raft. They overinvest their time and energy, praying for a different outcome. Blaming the timing allows you to walk away eventually without feeling like you failed. But ironically, it also absolutely guarantees that you will fail again in the exact same way. And that leads us directly to the third insight, the cycle of repetition. Because you never conduct an honest review of the wreckage, the exact same mistake always returns. It just comes back wearing slightly different clothes and a new face. You will meet a brand new person, and the exact same toxic dynamic will miraculously emerge. You will enter a new business negotiation and make the exact same critical error. Your ego is a brilliant salesman. It constantly convinces you that each new failure is a unique, one-off anomaly.
But if you strip away the details and look closely, the underlying architecture of the failure is identical. You are the common denominator in all of your repeated losses. Without ruthless self-honesty, you are doomed to loop through the same outcomes forever. It is like psychological Groundhog Day. You will spend years running in circles, sweating, exhausted, while falsely thinking you are climbing a mountain. Over time, this cycle of repetition heavily drains your masculine energy. You start to feel this deep, unrecognized psychological fatigue. You constantly wonder why your life feels like an endless loop of frustration. Here is the uncomfortable answer. Your ego has placed a hard, concrete ceiling on your evolution. Growth requires the sharp, burning pain of recognizing your own incompetence. You have to willingly step into the fire of self-critique to forge a sharper mind. When you let your ego rewrite the story, you permanently put out that fire. A man of cold reason observes his own behavioral patterns without flinching. He categorically refuses to let his ego edit the footage to make him look like the hero. He demands the raw, unedited truth about his own performance, no matter how much it stings. Now, there is a very persistent myth among men who consume self-improvement content. They fall into the trap of believing that adopting a cold mindset means viewing everyone else as flawed. They adopt this deeply cynical, bitter worldview where all modern people are damaged and the game is just rigged. They sit back, cross their arms, and constantly complain that loyalty, respect, and traditional values no longer exist. Listen carefully. This is not a true philosophy of power or control. This is just an elaborate, highly articulate complaint masquerading as Stoicism. Let's look at a stark comparison between two completely different mindsets. A man without frame gets rejected.
What does he do? He immediately goes to his friends or hops online. He complains endlessly about how toxic and broken the modern world has become. He completely absolves himself of any responsibility for the negative outcome. He gets his validation, he feels temporarily better, but he remains entirely powerless over his future. Now consider a man who truly understands the cold mechanics of reality. When he faces a loss, he doesn't complain. He retreats into silence and analyzes the raw data. He looks objectively at his own texts, his own posture, his own tone of voice, and his own decisions. He pinpoints the exact millisecond he compromised his internal boundaries. He adjusts his overall strategy, recalibrates, and never makes that same mistake again. How do you actually build this elite level of internal strength? You don't do it by just thinking about it. You must implement safe, actionable practices that completely bypass your ego's defense systems. The first practice is what I call the two-column reality check. You must do this after every significant conflict, rejection, or failure. Grab a physical piece of paper and a pen. Yes, actually write it down, and draw a line right down the middle. In the first column, write down exactly what was genuinely out of your control. This might include the other person's bad mood, a sudden external event, or a literal emergency. But be extremely strict here. Do not let excuses sneak into this column. In the second column, write down your exact contribution to the outcome. Maybe you texted way too much and killed the mystery. Maybe you completely failed to walk away when you were clearly being disrespected to your face. Maybe you ignored massive, glowing red flags because you were just desperate for some validation. Force yourself to fill this second column with brutal, uncomfortable honesty. This physical act of writing literally short-circuits the ego's ability to rewrite history.
It forces your highly logical prefrontal cortex to override your emotional defense mechanisms. You are taking abstract emotional pain and turning it into cold, actionable data. The second safe practice is finding an external reality auditor. Let's face it, your own mind is a heavily compromised environment when your pride is wounded. You cannot trust yourself. You desperately need an objective observer who does not care about your delicate feelings. Find one trusted man in your life who actually understands these specific principles. Do not go to a soft friend who just wants to blindly agree with you to make you feel better. Go to someone who will point out your strategic flaws without a second of hesitation. Present the situation to him using only raw facts and direct quotes. Do not add your colorful emotional interpretations or your complex paranoid theories about the other person's motives. Just give him the sequential timeline of events and ask for a sober analysis. Then, listen to his feedback without getting defensive or firing back with rapid-fire excuses. If you feel that intense, burning urge to argue with him, that is your ego trying to take the wheel. Breathe through that severe discomfort and accept the external data. This practice effectively destroys the comfortable, delusional echo chamber of your own mind. The third practice is shifting your core attention entirely from image to execution. Your ego actively edits the story because you are absolutely obsessed with looking successful. You are terrified of appearing weak to yourself or to the outside world. You must redirect this anxious, nervous energy into tangible, measurable development. Stop caring about the public narrative and start caring about your actual, real-world competence. Focus heavily on your deep work, your physical training, your financial strategy, and your skill set.
When you are genuinely building a high-value life behind closed doors, your ego naturally relaxes. You no longer need to invent elaborate fairy tales to protect your self-worth. Why? Because your value is firmly rooted in reality, not in a fragile, easily shattered mental image. A single rejection or a bad deal does not threaten a man who is actively building an empire. The desperate need to rewrite history vanishes the second your present reality is built on solid, undeniable ground. You have spent entirely too much time defending a fictional version of yourself that doesn't even exist. Your ego has been acting as a shield, but without you noticing, it has slowly become a cage. Sure,
It has kept you emotionally comfortable, but it has also kept you incredibly weak and stagnant. True power begins the exact moment you stop defending your image harder than you defend the truth. The cold, rational mind does not ever fear the reality of a loss. It consumes the loss, digests it, and uses it as raw fuel for future dominance. You are no longer a passive, helpless character in a sad story written by your own insecurities. You are the sole architect of your own baseline reality. So stop blaming the external environment. Stop using bad timing as a crutch. Stop claiming that everyone else was simply intimidated by your greatness. Look directly at the raw, unedited footage of your life and take absolute, unconditional ownership of the result. When you finally drop the heavy baggage of excuses, you pick up the ultimate control. Think about it. What behavioral patterns will you finally break when you decide to stop lying to yourself?